Chapter 10. My husband wrote many songs inspired by or dedicated to our son. One that still wrecks me after all these years is Come Back. It's the voice of Amir's daddy, alone with the echoed versions of himself, accompanied only by the quiet acoustic guitar I love. Sweet wind blew, not a moment too soon. I cried when I realized that sweet wind was you. In unresolved chords at the end of the song, you can hear this man's love for his child. It was bigger than him. We loved each other, but this child, we loved this child. He was everything to us. We would have done anything for him. I smell him, I told my husband. Do you? Yes. In the air when I wake up, I smell him. Like my senses can't accept he's gone. Don't say gone. He'll come back. He will. I know he will. As sure as the candle burns, every soul must return. I begged him to put me under and talk to me about it, but he wouldn't do that anymore. The deep connection created a door he was afraid to open now. We clung to our faith in eternal life and the great journey of the soul. We lay in the dark, talking about where Amir might be now and how we could bring him back. We didn't wait to try to get pregnant again, but this ordeal had left my spirit so empty. It didn't surprise me at all when my period came each month, my body telling me it wasn't time yet. My body was doing everything a woman's body is supposed to do after she gives birth to a baby. But nature designed all that with the baby in mind. My hormones were speedballing, and my breast ached even after the milk was gone, and the milk wasn't completely gone for a long time. I'd wake up from a dream about Amir and find it soaking my shirt and the sheets. I'd been in the military all my life, so I knew about post-traumatic stress syndrome, shell shock, they used to call it. But it never occurred to me that there are all kinds of battlefields in this world. Now I clearly see that we were both scarred and suffering for years, because we didn't know how to deal with it in the moment. I was a zombie for months. It was hard for me to see past my own pain long enough to understand what was going on with my husband. Even if I could have, he was not the type of guy you can bring chicken soup to when he's sick. He wasn't accessible that way. As his wife, I could get closer than a girlfriend, but even after I had the phone numbers, there was a point of do not enter. There were times when I knew better than to intrude. As cliché as it is for sexy older men to date younger women, I think his preference was more than physical. It was about the power balance. He didn't like to be argued with. He wasn't used to someone banging on the door saying, "I'm coming in, I don't care what you say." Before we were married, he wrote to me. A secret. When I have a disagreement with someone, it's usually only one. Then they're gone. I don't mind them, disagreement, with you, because I know we'll always be together. Although I hate to fight, I hope we are both better souls from the exercise. That's how I look at it, as exercise. The toning of the heart muscle so it's strong and able to withstand anything when I'm a father. I'm gonna be one, you know, when I'm ready. I'm glad you're young 'cause you can wait for me. Well, I hope you do. I only want your kids. We're so much alike, it's inevitable. If fighting was exercise, the last year of our marriage was a spin class from hell. But there was a long stretch before that when I truly believed we'd be all right. At first, the best we could do was pretend to be all right. We didn't know how to do this, so we just kept trudging forward, walking wounded, trying to look like everything was normal. Everyone has their own way of mourning, and my husband's way of dealing with anything painful was work, creating music and playing it for people. That was the only solid ground he'd ever known. A few days before the Oprah interview aired, Betcha by Golly Wow was released. He had recorded the song while I was pregnant and started working on the music video in the aftermath. His vision for this video involved children, as many of his videos did, dancers in white alphabet unitards that spelled out Betcha by Golly Wow, a gymnast, and this whole very charming dance, all cut into a storyline about him hurrying into the ER, where I'm sitting on an exam room gurney in a hospital gown. At the end, when he finally gets to me, we embrace with joy, and you get that we've just learned I'm pregnant. It's beautifully done, incredibly sweet. People loved it, and everyone has always naturally assumed that this sentimental moment was captured while I was pregnant. It wasn't. It was done in early November 1996, only a few weeks after we lost Amir. When he told me about this idea and said he wanted to shoot the scene at the hospital where Amir had recently died, I wanted to shake him. I wanted to slap him and say, "Are you serious right now?" The idea of going back into that hospital made my legs feel weak. But he was so earnest about his vision. He wanted to return to a moment where he felt complete joy, complete faith, complete love, and he wanted to take me with him. I can look at it now and see the sweetness of it, but for a long time I couldn't look at it at all. I did it for the same reason I did Oprah. I didn't know what else I could do to help him. If nothing else, I wanted to be in the same room with him. If that room was Studio B, fine. If it was our bedroom, even better. This man was my family now, and I was his. If he'd asked me to drive off a cliff with him, I would have done it. Mama had put off the surgery to remove a large tumor from her uterus as long as she could, but I urged her not to postpone it any longer. Having gained a whole new appreciation for Mama, I was determined to be there for her. I arrived at the hospital to find that, because the surgery was gynecological, they had her in the maternity ward. The hospital was hard. This was too much. My husband found me sobbing about it and said, "We'll get her a nurse. She can go home and you can be with her." The official release of Emancipation was also happening in November, and a huge part of the PR push was his live appearance on Oprah. So my husband went to Chicago to do the live portion of her show. He went on to do as many performances as he could wedge in for the next several weeks. I was relieved to see Emancipation quickly climb the charts, to number 11 in the United States and top 20 in the United Kingdom. I knew it would do his heart good. So much of his vision for the future was riding on that release and the independent distribution deal he'd struck with EMI. He left on tour, which was a form of escape for him. Now it'll hit him, I thought. I was worried about him riding alone on the bus and brooding in a hotel room in the dark hours before dawn. In mid-December, he canceled 2 shows, which is something he never did. When I went to talk to him about it, I found wine spilled on the rug in the hallway and vomit on the bathroom floor. I knew he was struggling. I knew he was in pain. But I was struggling myself. I never told him about my thoughts of suicide or how close I had come to actually doing it. The moment Mia saved me from myself remained a secret between her and me. I didn't want my husband to worry about me, but I started to think he knew, because my Vicodin kept disappearing. The prescription would be filled, and a few days later, most of the pills would be gone. I assumed he was hiding them to keep me from hurting myself. In retrospect, I don't know what to think. At that time in our life, he alienated a lot of people. As I got back into the business of living, I'd go to New York to visit Jen, or I'd go to Miami to hang out with my mother, but it was unusual for them to come to Minneapolis. We rarely had guests, unless it was work-related, and my husband was gone a lot of the time. It felt so strange not to be working, to be sitting there alone. The tabloid coverage of our loss rubbed salt in the wound. While the celebrity news cycle hadn't reached the frenzied fever pitch of today, it was still in overdrive. And as one of the biggest pop stars in the world, my husband and our tragedy got a lot of play in some of the sleaziest media out there. One day, at the grocery store, I was standing in line trying not to look at the twisted headlines, and some well-meaning idiot said to me, "Did you have your baby yet?" I left my tampons and Advil on the conveyor belt and cried in my car. The tabloids were full of speculation and ugly rumors. I'm not even going to address all that here. It was devastating. Creating music was my husband's solid ground. Dancing was mine. It's not like I could just slide back into my skinny jeans like nothing had happened. I'd gained over 80 pounds while I was pregnant. 40 of that disappeared immediately because extreme fluid retention was one of the symptoms that indicated serious problems with the pregnancy. It had been the first real warning sign that something was terribly wrong. The rest of the weight came from the normal weight gain of pregnancy, combined with months of inactivity. I refused to beat myself up about it, but I had to work it off. I'm built like my dad, with a bodybuilder's musculature. It served me well when I was dancing hard 7 days a week, but as I lay in the hospital, I could feel myself getting softer every day. I had planned for this, but my plan was to go work out with a personal trainer while Amir giggled in his bassinet nearby. I planned to hike with him on my back and teach him to swim and play all day. Instead, I was alone, trying to rebuild my body like a house after a hurricane. Christmas came and went, but we hardly noticed it. I told Mama, sometimes couples need a break, so this is going to be our break, and we'll get strong again. We'll find each other. He wanted the same thing. On our first anniversary, February 14th, 1997, he released Kama Sutra, the music he'd composed for our wedding with the MPG orchestra. I listened to it over and over and felt myself coming out of this thick fog of grief I'd been trying to find my way through. I listened to the new music he was working on, and it was full of love for me and Amir. We agreed that we needed to go somewhere, make a place for just the two of us, far away from the business and the tabloids and the demands, a place we could retreat to and have another baby surrounded by peace and music and privacy. We considered Hawaii, but they said I'd have to leave me in quarantine for 6 months, and that was not happening. What about Egypt, he asked, and I was into that idea right away. My memories of Egypt, going all the way back to my childhood, were filled with mystic connection, more beauty than a pair of eyes could take in, and the rich scent of dreams coming true. There would be a bit of culture shock, I said, but I would love to live there, and maybe we could do some good, you know? When I was a kid, the first thing was this culture shock. I'd never seen such poverty. The children run around, and their hair is light brown with dust. They're out at midnight because they swap times in the house. They rotate times to be out on the street. I mean, I'd come home and kiss the soil grateful for what we have. And I do have a problem with the way women are treated, but I've always felt a connection to the music, the architecture, the people. There's an energy there that I've never felt anywhere else. He'd been soul-searching, reading books on various religions, consuming one tome after another on Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, and Islam. He wanted me to read with him and discuss all different types of scripture, and that was a conversation I was into. I was curious to learn about the world beyond the boundaries of my grandmother's strict Catholic faith. He asked me about the Muslims in Egypt, and I said, "There's something about it that appeals to me. I hear the music and the prayers, and it seems natural, comforting. I never felt out of place there. You hear this amazing singing and everything stops and people pray. I'd been stranded on planes because it was prayer time." "They stopped to pray," he said. "To observe that practice, to prioritize that in your life, it would change everything." We decided to go house hunting that spring. While he continued touring, I went ahead to make arrangements. When he arrived, I took him everywhere. We bought oils in the marketplace, visited the musical instrument shops on Muhammad Ali Street, and sat in the nightclubs watching the belly dancers. We got henna tattoos on our hands and walked around the Great Pyramids. We looked at houses and visited mosques and ruins. At the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, we stood for a long time, looking at Akhenaten and Nefertiti, listening to the tour guide's short version of their great love story. Akhenaten had desperately wanted a son, but Nefertiti gave him 6 daughters. So he had a male child with someone simply known as the younger woman. But his undying love for Nefertiti overcame her wrath. He raised her up as an equal, and together they revolutionized Egypt and changed the world. We stood there for a long time, taking it all in, fate and coincidence swirling around us. It wasn't just that we looked like these people or the fact that they were called children of the sun by some. We felt connected to them in a way we couldn't explain or speak about to anyone but each other. It was profound. It was real. We didn't want to leave that room. And when we finally did, it was because we needed to be alone together in private. When we came home, it was as if we'd started a new life together, reborn to each other. We found each other again, and the miracle of that made us laugh and love each other even more. He created a beautiful office for me next to his office on the second floor, and I loved occupying it along with Mia and a tank full of tropical fish, all of whom had names, including Larry the starfish. Outside the door, the doves were always billing and cooing softly. I went in every morning feeling loved and creative and energized, and I started tracking my temperature with a basal thermometer. My spirit felt ready to have another baby, and I wanted to make sure my body didn't miss any opportunities. In April, EMI Capital shut down, which pretty much screwed my husband's distribution deal. And that was a bitter disappointment. But he was already on to the next thing. The new Power Soul album and rehearsals for the Jam of the Year tour. Because moving on to the next thing was always his defense mechanism of choice. He had another batch of songs he'd pulled from the vault, and those were coming together as a project called Crystal Ball. He was also hanging around with Clive Davis, the president of Arista, engaged in the early stages of Rave Onto the Joy Fantastic, and I have to say, Clive had the best take on the never-ending question, what do you call him? It's like when you get married, said Clive. You can't call your father-in-law Dad. That's awkward, so you run around looking for substitutions, and then you end up just saying, hi. For a long time, I'd wanted to do a major project of my own, and I felt ready. Ever since I saw the Joffrey Ballet interpret some of his music, I'd been thinking I'd like to form a dance company and take that idea to the next level. I told my husband, I want to do something like the Joffrey did, but I want to make it even better. I've been waiting for you to say that, he said. Tell me what you need. Just give me the music. I sat dancer style on the floor in front of my fish tank with 30 Prince, Symbol, and New Power Generation CDs spread out on the carpet in front of me. This was only a fraction of my husband's enormous body of work. In addition to all this music and everything still on the shelf and in the vault, he'd written a play and an opera, and he'd created the MPG orchestra to do the music for our wedding. He'd always wanted to do something on Broadway. And then there was Kama Sutra. I looked at the image of myself dancing on the cover. My shadow was a symbol that was now his name. This music was moving and told a story about a love affair between a rock star and a ballerina. I went next door and I said, I want to do Kama Sutra. I developed a script with a 3-act structure. The first act was the hits, because Mama gotta pay them bills. The second act was Kama Sutra because, wow, it was classical, instrumental, and with the darkness and sexiness that a dancer would drool to move to. The third act was all new music, because our long-term vision was to eventually come together in one spectacular show we could take on tour together. It meant a lot to me that he treated me with such respect, never second-guessing or selling me short. From the early years of our friendship, he made me feel that my endeavors as an artist mattered as much as his did. But this was something beyond that. He was prepared to invest in my vision. I was absolutely in the driver's seat, but I welcomed his input. Everybody should look different, he said. Like the hair should be purple or electric blue or shocking pink. This was before shocking pink hair was popular. So I was into that and figured I could run interference if anyone objected. After a few months, these dancers were like my kids. They trusted me. The advance press was going well. Booking was a challenge because he was going through a period of being very anti-agent, anti-promoter, anti-everybody. He did all this himself. He'd pick up the phone and say, yeah, I'd like to come and play at your place for a couple days next month. Whoever was on the other end of that phone call was instantly falling over themselves to pay him whatever he wanted to be paid and make sure he had the right brand of bottled water backstage. He expected me to do the same and couldn't understand why it didn't really work out that way for me. I was pretty good at a lot of things. By this time, I had experience directing music videos, editing, and becoming the company director. I was choreographer, stage coordinator, stage director, lighting, all that. But booking a company of 40 dancers was a bit more complicated than booking myself at a Turkish restaurant. We had some choice words about it, but these arguments felt like Akhenaten and Nefertiti in a joint effort to rule the world, not like Mama and Daddy in a jealous rage. It felt like the soul exercise Prince wrote about in that letter so long ago. We were finally there. Mama says she knew the minute she was pregnant with me because she was monitoring her temperature every day with a basal thermometer. My basal thermometer was a super fancy digital version of that, accurate to a millionth of a degree or something. So when it showed a slight shift 3 days in a row, I checked my calendar and I realized I was late. I hopped in my pink BMW and dashed to the grocery store for a basket full of pregnancy tests. I went to my office at Paisley and held the first box between my hands, saying a prayer before I opened it. I took that one in the office, then went home to take the rest. The little plus sign wasn't as bright as it was the first time, but it was positively positive. Excitement and fear tangled up and tied a knot in my stomach. My hands were shaking when I called my husband and said, "Can you come home?" "We're rehearsing," he said. "I'll be there soon." "No, come now." I sat on a kitchen chair, willing myself not to freak out, waiting for the sound of the big garage door and that distinctive jingle step in the hallway. Hi. I'm pregnant. Everything that I'd been feeling, excitement, fear, hope, caution, it all flashed through his eyes before he took a deep breath and said, "You are?" I held up the little stick, but he already had me tight in his arms, laughing for joy, kissing me and kissing my belly, shifting into Papa Bear mode. "What are you going to do with the dance company?" "Not dance. Maybe we should cancel." "No, they've worked too hard for this," I said. "And I want to stay busy so I don't obsess with every little thing with everything. But I won't dance. I'll take it easy. I promise. I'll step up and help however I can." It was the end of August. My OB calculated the baby's due date, May 10, 1998. Mother's Day. Mama's birthday. It felt like a good omen. "Let's not tell people right away," I said. "Let's get through the first trimester and make sure everything's okay." All we had to do was make it to November 19th, I told myself. Then we could breathe again. We could open the door to that big playroom at Paisley Park, turn on the lights, and give ourselves over to the sheer happiness. He flew with me to the dance company's opening night in Chicago. All the band members came, so I felt wonderfully loved and supported. And I was proud of what I'd created. During dress rehearsal, I felt a surge of pride and a capable, "Yeah, I got this" handle on life. The baby growing in my belly made me feel like a creative tour de force. One of the guys in the dance company came to me fussing about his wig, and in full-on Nefertiti mode, I said, "Wear the wig or go home, don't stress me out." On opening night, I sat in the audience with a headset, giving lighting cues as the performance came off without a noticeable hitch, and my husband sat next to me, looking smug and comfortable. I did him proud, and he liked feeling good. We went home, and after some heart-to-heart discussion, we disbanded the company, promising to come back to it after the baby was born. It would take a lot of time and energy to turn a profit. For now, I wanted to focus my energy on the baby. I also worried that it was an expensive production to put on the road, and while I wasn't super involved in our family finances, I knew that distribution deal had gone bad, and that was not a good thing. I'd never asked a lot of questions about money, but one day he sent me along with one of his bodyguards to buy a new Jeep Cherokee, white with a cream interior and every option known to automobile kind. He sent me along to pay for the $46,000 vehicle with an American Express card. I remember when I was a little girl, the very first check I wrote, one of those fake checks you got in the junk mail, was made out to Daddy for $1 million. This felt kind of like that. At the end of the summer, my husband played the Pyramid Arena in Memphis, and he noticed that Larry Graham was playing a small venue nearby that same night. There was an after show at Music Mix Factory in Nashville. He called Larry and asked him if he wanted to come over and jam. He was elated when he called me afterward. He said that he and Larry had an unspoken rapport. They didn't even have to look at each other to know where the music was going. Larry's psychedelic soul, funk pedigree was stellar. He'd come up with Sly and the Family Stone, and he'd innovated his own particular style called thumpin' and pluckin', which involved slapping the strings and creating a whole different sound. But the connection my husband felt with Larry was spiritual, not just musical. "This man's faith is so certain," he said. There was no room for doubts or fears. I was happy for him. I thought this friendship would be a healthy, positive influence. He told me Larry was a strong family man and a brilliant musician. He'd had a handful of R&B hits, one that crossed over to Billboard's top 10 in 1980. After that, his experience in the industry was more typical than my husband's. He worked hard and toured hard, with genuine passion for music and genuine faith that he would be led in the direction God wanted him to go. When Larry and his wife, Tina, came to Minnesota to hang out with us, I was impressed with their daughter and their obvious bond as a family. Tina was a personality and a half, with a great laugh and a church lady grace. Larry had kind eyes and a broad, easygoing smile, and he was unabashedly crazy in love with his wife, which I found charming. The only thing that made me a little uncomfortable was that Larry sometimes went off on these long sermons about, I don't even know. I can't even tell you what they were about. These long-winded teachings were like no brand of Christianity I'd seen before. The more I heard about the Jehovah's Witnesses, and the Watchtower, and Armageddon, and the pagan root of birthdays and Christmas, the less it appealed to me. There was so little room for celebration, and even less for doubt. This was not a problem for me. I respect the belief systems of others, but I didn't feel that mutual, whatever peanut butter's your jelly vibe coming back from them. It just didn't sit right with me. I'm not judging, I'm just not feeling it, I said to my husband after sitting through another mind-numbing evening. I smoothed my hand over my belly. I don't know what kind of medical treatment this little one might need, and when he gets here healthy and strong, I'm not going to tell him his birthday's been canceled. We're celebrating. Balloons, acrobats, those inflatable jumping things, petting zoo, the whole 9 yards. You'll think you died and went to Glam Slam heaven. In September, he went out on the Gem of the Year tour and took Larry with him. As fall went by, he worked on New Power Soul, staying late every night in the studio, and I was determined to stay by his side. Sometimes by 3 or 4 in the morning, I was sleeping with my eyes open, but I sat on that studio sofa, my head bouncing to the beat. We welcomed every little sign of a healthy pregnancy. If I got lightheaded or sleepy, he'd be there with his arm around my waist. He'd spread his hands over my midsection, measuring the little pooch that was starting to be noticeable. This pregnancy felt very different from the first one, and we agreed that that was a good thing. My weight was on point, my belly wasn't growing much, and my symptoms weren't as visible. My boobs grew, and I got dizzy, but nothing else. We wanted to wait until the 3-month mark to listen for a heartbeat and start getting ultrasounds, but we were confident that this baby was healthy. Come on, November 19th, I prayed silently. We can do this, little one. On November 19th, I woke up, prepared for a busy, joyful day. I went into the bathroom and found blood seeping out of me. It felt like a long walk to the telephone. I'm bleeding. He took a short, sharp breath. Okay. I'm going to the doctor. Okay. I'll call you. Okay, bye. Click. I went to the doctor's office and got an ultrasound. The good news is that there's no heartbeat, she said. There's placenta, but no fetus. Your body is trying to naturally expel the products of conception. I remember thinking, thank God. I was intensely, selfishly grateful for every minute I held Amir in my arms, but to prevent his suffering, I would have been willing to suffer anything, including the heartbreak I was suffering now. I sat in the car sobbing, trying to find the strength to go inside and tell my husband what I had to tell him. When I was finally able to face him, we stood in the office. I told him what the doctor had told me, but the words weren't even necessary. The reality of another crushing loss hung in the air between us. It was impossible to read the expression on his face. I need to get back to the studio. And he walked toward the door. I went down to stay with Mama for a few days, and she was concerned when the bleeding didn't stop. I'd done the research on miscarriages and hoped it wouldn't be an issue, but after several days, it seemed to be getting worse, not better. I was trying to go out on tour with my husband as much as I could, but I was miserable and still bleeding. As soon as we got home, I went to the doctor. She says I need a D&C, I told my husband. Dilation and curettage. It removes the lining of the uterus so you don't hemorrhage. Nature will take its course if you let it. But nature isn't always, either we have faith or we don't. Larry is always saying, Larry has a child. He should thank God for that and stay out of other people's business. It came out sharper than I meant it to. This isn't how I'd seen the conversation going. I looked at my husband, searching for something that felt like the protective stance that used to make me feel safe and sure of the world. There was only that same off-putting certitude that had troubled me about Larry, along with the solid refusal to place my physical well-being over his self-righteousness. I'm not going to risk my future fertility for something I don't even believe in, I told him. I'm going to do what the doctor says. I'm going to the hospital. He looked at me, and there was a flash of something. Concern? Grief? Or maybe just fear. He said, "Do you want Tina to go to the hospital with you?" "No, I want you. I don't believe in what you're doing. I have to do this. I could bleed to death. Maybe God is taking care of me by sending me a doctor." He called his limo driver to take me to the hospital. A compromise, I guess. The D&C was done, and a biopsy of the tissue they removed showed XX chromosomes. It's called a partial molar pregnancy, my OB explained. The egg is fertilized and implants itself, but it doesn't develop for one reason or another. It can be genetic or inadequate nutrition. Like a vegan diet? I can't say without genetic testing. You and your husband would need to be tested. That's really the only way to know what's going on with you. Would it work if I did the testing myself? To some extent, she said. If you test positive for certain genetic issues, that could be the answer. Whether he's positive or negative, if you're negative, do the math. I knew my husband was not going to participate in the testing, but I needed to know. I tried not to feel like a traitor as they drew the blood for it. Fine, whatever, I told myself. I'm just a birthday-loving pagan. Nothing wrong with that. I said nothing about it when the test results came back. There was no abnormality in my DNA. I didn't see any need for him to know that at the time. I figured I'd let him play and let myself heal, and then we could go somewhere private and talk about our options. I counted my Vicodin every morning and tried to keep an eye on it at night. I tried to get back on track, tried to keep up. I sat in a public restroom at a stadium in Fargo, or some such place, feeling like my body was being turned inside out, but I was determined to keep going until I couldn't. One day, he surprised me with a trip to Versace. He wanted to buy me a gorgeous gown to wear to some upcoming event, but this thing cost more than my first car. I went back the next day and returned it. I didn't tell him. It was a sweet gesture, and I didn't want him to think I didn't appreciate it. In the spring of 1998, my husband asked me to direct a music video for a song called The One. The lyrics he'd written for me described both the man he didn't want to be, a man who'll treat you like anything but a queen. I ain't the one. And the man he did want to be. Treat your every step like you're walking on holy ground. I am the one. It spoke so powerfully of how hard he was trying to find his way back to me, especially when he mixed an alternate version in which he sang, My, Tay, I'm the one. The arrangement, a lavish background by the MPG Orchestra, is an intoxicating blend of jazz and Arabic vibe. I danced the lead with my husband and cast members of the MPG dance company as the women of the harem. The choreography felt natural and sensual, taking us back to everything that had brought us together in the beginning. We created a story within a story. Dressed as a Charlie Chaplin hobo, he comes to the door of a shabby house where a girl, me, and her mother bicker. He sees her open a book that transports her to a harem where they dance with all the beautiful young odalisques. They try to distract him, but he always returns to the woman he loves, and by the end, we're literally bound together. We return to the real world on the shabby front porch, and I open the door to find him standing there. In the colorful dream world that exists parallel to that gray place, the prince puts his arm around the princess, and they are one. He gave me carte blanche to do this short film however I wanted, so I reached for the moon and got it. Rita Moreno was cast to play my mother. The first day on set, when I saw her in the flesh, every little Puerto Rican girl's triple threat dream, I had to go in the dressing room and sit with my head down for a minute. My husband came in to see if I was all right, and I said, "Do you know who that is?" He laughed and he said, breathe, get it together, and go do it. I knew what I wanted, but I questioned myself. It meant a lot to have him show me such respect and approval, and to have Rita Moreno asking me for direction, I can't even. Hyperventilation. She was alert to everything going on around her and willing to try anything. We went over the storyboard and discussed the scene where we're arguing with each other, and she came up with some hilarious bits, blowing dust in my face and smudging my blouse with dirt, which had my husband in stitches. He laughed and listened and asked questions. Never once did he say, "Hey, you know what would be cool?" I couldn't have asked for two actors I loved and looked up to more than these two. They both recognized how important this little film was to me and gave me everything I needed to make my vision a reality. From the first rehearsals through the last cut of the editing process, I kept my hands around this piece. My husband came and went from the studio while I was working on it. He asked me to thread a secret message around the vignette scenes on the pages of the book, and he wanted the opening words of the story to be, "In the beginning." But beyond that, he left the whole thing up to me. He loved that I sensed the beats of the music and of the eye in a way he tried to explain to other editors without success. The One is the truest work we created together. When you look at it, even if you don't know the backstory, the love between us is tangible. There's a shadow of sadness in the music, but the sensuality overwhelms it. There's tension in the choreography, but it's overcome by grace. I saw it as a story of us, two souls that drift apart and come together over and over, just like the story of Seven. In keeping with my belief in our eternal love, the video ends with a black screen that reads, "The Beginning." And for a while it was. Working together on The One brought the fresh surge of tenderness and connection I'd been longing for. We decided to buy a house in Spain, something in Marbella, looking out over the sea. When he went out on tour again, I went to Spain and put wheels in motion. It felt like I looked at 100 places, and finally, he circled one in a realtor's catalog and told me to buy it. It was a big mansion on the coast, not a normal person's house like our house in Minnesota. From the balcony, you could see the Rock of Gibraltar and the distant coast of North Africa. The plan was for me to go to Spain and buy this house after I did some media. I went on BET for the world premiere of The One in June 1998. But after that, I stuck around long enough to go on Vibe with my husband, Shaka Khan, and Larry. My husband loved the details in the costuming in The One, including fine curls sculpted on my forehead instead of bangs. "You should do that for Vibe," he said. So before we went on the show hosted by Sinbad, I had his hairdresser, Kim, carefully create them. She's a true artist when it comes to curls. During the first part of the show, Sinbad was a big, adorable teddy bear. Shaka Khan was her fabulous self, and Larry was the coolest dude you'd ever want to sit next to. I'd been waiting backstage with my husband, not expecting to go on the show itself, but when Sinbad introduced the Funketeer himself with the iconic opening chords of 1999, he caught my hand and wouldn't let go. "What, am I doing this?" "I'm not hooked up with a mic or anything," I said, but he was already pulling me towards the stage manager who held the curtain open. The stage manager and I smiled and shrugged at each other, and my husband and I walked down the stairs together and sat on the sofa next to Shaka after a quick hug from Larry. Things started out great. My husband cracked everyone up talking like Mickey Mouse, and then he said something very sweet and heartfelt about how being married did help a lot, opening me up to being more comfortable with speaking in public. He went on to speak intelligently about the cause he'd been fighting for the past 3 years. "What a lot of artists, I think, don't recognize," he said, "is that when they get into the business and they sign away the rights to the master recordings, it in fact makes you a slave, in the sense that the proceeds from those master recordings, for all of time, will go to whoever owns them." "Some cat who can't play," Sinbad said. The audience hooted for that, and we all laughed and nodded. "Well, you said it, I didn't," my husband smiled. What we've been trying to do with New Power Generation, what it stands for is a creative freedom and financial freedom to run and operate your own genesis, so to speak, so that you reach a much brighter revelation. There was a round of applause, and I was part of it. I was incredibly proud of the way he'd stood up for his rights as an artist, and he was finally starting to get people on his side. Not record people, music people. The people who loved and respected him and wanted to work with him. And the massive audience who just wanted to see and hear him do his thing. "Now when is this thing hitting?" Sinbad asked, holding up the new Power Soul CD. "Bam," he said, and the audience loved that too. He talked about The One and Crystal Ball and about how albums had drawn him to Shaka and Larry in the 1970s. Sinbad brought up the name thing and talked about why he himself picked the name Sinbad. For the daring dude in the old movies. "That's sort of a precarious situation for me," said my husband, "because to people who love me, this made the crowd go nuts and call out, 'We love you!' To people who love me, I get off on the fact that they think of me as a prince, so I'm pretty much cool with that. It's when they don't respect the fact that I've adopted a name that has no pronunciation that it gets to be troublesome." Sinbad broke for a commercial. Tina, Larry's wife, was not about to remain offsides after I came out, so she came and sat with us, which confused me a little, but okay. Tina was great, and Larry and Tina together were great as long as they didn't start. Oh God, it started. "Originally, when I had written this song," said my husband, "I must admit, I was a little fearful to call it The Christ, and my good friend Larry hit me to some things, and it woke me up to, or maybe, let him explain it." Larry was already on the edge of his seat, more than willing to get in there and explain it. "Well, actually, we've had a number of, very good Bible discussions," he said, "and we do this on a regular basis, the whole family of us, and, well, that's a different artist tour," Sinbad quipped, trying to keep it light. "Yeah, we do a lot together, and each day, each time you have these deep discussions, you enlighten to various things, and you make various adjustments in your life. You make various adjustments in a lot of areas." I sat there with a frozen smile thinking, whoa, hold up, please. In this one particular Bible discussion we were having had to do with stauros, which is an upright stake or pole. Larry went off on one of the arcane scripture lessons, which I'd become more familiar than I ever wanted to be. I squeezed my husband's hand, but he was looking at Larry with rapt attention. And come to find out, Larry finally seemed to be wrapping it up. Jesus actually died on an upright stake or pole. "He was impaled," my husband said, and Tina echoed, "Yes, impaled." "Like this." Larry demonstrated with his arms above his head. "He was impaled, as opposed to like this." He opened his arms to demonstrate a crucified Jesus. Something that felt like a fire alarm went off inside my head. How is this happening right now? Observing my husband from the corner of my eye, I felt my heart sink. No way would he have allowed Larry to go off on a ramble like that without agreeing in advance that that's how it was going to go down. So the question was, well, then, why is it then that, people do this and people choose this or that, and so he chose to want to make it clear. The audience sat there, silent and confused. You could almost hear the eyes glazing over. They were here to see the artist formerly known as Prince. They were here for the music. Now the studio was heavy with that feeling you get when the Jehovah's Witness knocks on your door and you know he already saw you in the driveway. You don't want to be rude, but dang. And sometimes the truth, it may hurt a little bit, but various things, if a person finds out, well, I was thinking this or thinking that the whole time. And now, all of a sudden, you need to make an adjustment in your thinking. Well, that's not on me. It's written. It's written. He went on like that for another 3 minutes until Sinbad smoothly intervened and said, "Looks like we're about to go to church." Big laugh. There was another commercial break, thank God, and then my husband, Shaka, and Larry performed and blew the doors off the place, because that is what the funk they were born to do. Alone with my husband that night, I could see he was so proud. He knew he was pushing the envelope, but thought it went great. I didn't have the heart to ruin it for him, so I kept my opinion to myself. I was just happy to be with him. I told myself he was grieving. Everyone has to grieve in his own way. I was certain he'd work through this difficult phase. Larry would have his collaborative role in the music and then disappear. On to the next thing. I'd seen my husband go through plenty of other creative phases. He loved learning and needed a friend. Larry was a good teacher, and had a perpetually inviting energy. How could that be a bad thing? I seemed to be the only one who had a problem with it. As the study sessions expanded, I felt less and less like a part of the group because my beliefs so clearly didn't fall into line. Now, whenever I mentioned Akhenaton and Nefertiti, he explained to me how idolatrous and misguided they were. He kept encouraging me to hang out with Tina, and I tried to participate in the study sessions, but it simply wasn't my truth. Men and women studied separately, and I believe faith should bring people together. I believe birthdays are beautiful. I believe all good people will be rewarded in the end. We went with Larry's family to meetings on Saturday morning, and I was certain I smelled alcohol as we made our way to our seats. Either some of these people got tore up drinking the night before, or they were drinking first thing in the morning. Since we were married, we could sit next to each other. Otherwise, men and women were segregated. People recited scripture, interpreting it with a strained logic that seemed to have a lot more to do with what they wanted it to say than what it actually said. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Something as straightforward as that could be morphed to some kind of diatribe, and then everyone would nod and agree, stricken by this profound truth. After an hour or two of that, I was yearning for a Shark Tank to dive into. I kept comforting myself with the memory of another celebrity trying to win him over to Scientology years earlier. It's intriguing, he said, but I don't need somebody telling me how to believe in my God. He was always a spiritual seeker, I told myself, fascinated enough in all possibilities to integrate the signs of the zodiac and third eye and reincarnation into the Christian beliefs his Baptist mother and Seventh-day Adventist father had exposed him to. He was way too smart to be sucked into something just because he was vulnerable in that moment. There was a brief tour to raise money for a charitable organization, Love for One Another, and though I was too beat down to go with him, I needed to see him, so I showed up to surprise him one night. In the craft service area, I saw this girl who kind of looked like me, but earthier, wearing jeans with flat boots with no makeup. She was youthful, easygoing, like a kid fresh out of school. My husband had been spending a lot of time in online chat rooms. Someone told me she was a superfan who'd connected with him on one of the sites dedicated to all things Prince. I looked at her and got a bad feeling in my gut. Listen to your gut, girls. A woman's intuition is no joke. I casually asked a few people, "Who's that girl? Why is she on the tour?" And someone introduced me to her. "Mayte, this is Manuela. We hired her to do some charity work and merchandising." "Really?" I said, looking directly into her dark eyes. "Because I'm in charge of merchandising and Love for One Another, and I've never met you." She laughed. I smiled my ballerina smile. And that's when my husband walked in and shook her hand. Just as he'd shaken my hand years before, when we were both so much younger. When we were alone on the tour bus later, I said to him, "I'm not stupid. I know something is going on." "There's nothing going on," he insisted. "Why would you even think that?" I know that handshake. I remember it from when I was 17 years old and Carmen Electra was standing there next to me, thinking she was the only woman you'd ever love. When I got the handshake in front of Carmen, he and I weren't intimate yet, but we both knew it was going to happen. With Manuela, I could feel the coming attraction energy, like the moments the lights go down in a theater before the main act comes on stage. He hadn't been intimate with her yet, or so I've been told, but the overture was playing. And this time, he was a married man. In my mind and in his, I know this made a huge difference. The hailstorm of harsh words, jealousy, betrayal, denial, indignation, it was all sickeningly familiar. I'd listened to my parents have this same fight 1,000 times, and so had my husband. We were just keeping up with the family tradition, it seemed. He was terribly offended, denied everything, and sent me home to Minnesota. And I didn't cry all the way home. I never saw this as a deal breaker. My husband was a complicated man. I knew what I was signing up for, and along with the tradition of waging war on each other, my parents routinely strayed, then got past it and stayed together. They had children, they made a life. Their complicated marriage lasted decades, because even when they couldn't stand to look at each other, they still loved each other. I told myself I just needed to be with him. I had to prove my strength as a performer and a wife and a friend and a partner who brought to the table something meaningful of my own. I thought that if I performed with him again, it would bring back that energy we had. One night, he wanted me to go to a basketball game with him, but I was feeling so wrung out and depleted, I just couldn't. Somehow, my no thanks turned into a giant blowout. The first and only time in all our years together that he looked me in the eye and said, "Fuck you." What? I was instantly at code orange. What did you say to me? You know how many people want to go to this basketball game with me? How many women exhaust themselves trying to get my attention? Oh, I know, I promised him. Believe me, I know. Larry and Tina were now living in our guest house. They were touring together, working on an album. I had a hard time understanding what the business arrangement was between him and Larry. I sat through a lot of blather about how contracts are hostile, but Mama had brought me up to know that good fences make good neighbors. So the idea of working that way made little sense to me. I kept reminding my husband of our decision to go somewhere far away from all this. He suggested we could open an orphanage in Spain, but I had no idea how such a thing would be accomplished. I still don't. I tried to talk to him about adopting a baby, but he stuck to the company line about God's will and the superior wisdom of nature. But what's more natural than loving a child? Manuela was now diligently studying with the group. He told me, and she always looked so comfortable in jeans and boots and her hair naturally wavy. You should stop straightening your hair, said my husband. Keep it natural. I was starting to feel desperate. I just wanted to get him to Marbella so we could start over. I went to Spain to buy the house, and the money for the down payment wasn't there. I panicked, and thinking about the Cherokee purchase, I said, "Do you take American Express?" They didn't. After 2 anxious days, the money appeared. I bought the house and started the complicated process of moving us out there. I made frequent trips home, not wanting to leave him with Manuela too long. If I'm to be totally honest, I have to accept that I'd left him alone too much already. I wondered if I could have tried harder to understand what he'd been through. I thought about the many days and nights I spent locked inside my own pain, not knowing or particularly caring where he was, other than to note that he wasn't there for me. Trying to shake off the fog of depression, I spent time with John in New York. I'd taken refuge at Mama's home in Miami. I went to Hawaii alone. When we were in bed together, if I was able to come home, or he'd let me meet up with him on tour, I'd spoon up to him, wanting to be close, but I could feel the silence, and the coolness, and the tension growing. Finally, he did come to Spain, but he had the whole entourage with him, and I noticed Manuela was wearing a gold chain with this symbol encrusted in diamonds. Not exactly the kind of thing you get from the merch table at a concert. He didn't even bother trying to explain to me why it was important for an administrative person from the charity to be at every concert, including this appearance on my own stomping ground. Conveniently, the extramarital relationship didn't conflict with the study crew dogma, I guess. We went back to Europe, and on a chartered flight, she sat directly behind us. I sat there feeling sick to my stomach. On stage in Marbella, we performed The One, and I wondered, what kind of woman could watch a man she cared about on stage with his wife, professing their love like that? Did that bother her at all? Later on, she told me that they weren't physical until some time after that, and I thought, yeah, whatever. The timing doesn't seem all that important to me. Several times, while I was in Spain, overseeing the renovations on the house, I got phone calls from people saying, "Hey, I saw you and Prince in New York at such and such restaurant. I didn't come and say hi because I saw you guys walking into the private room." I stood there shaking, left with 2 options: humiliate myself by saying it wasn't me, or pretend it was me and be humiliated later when they heard it through the grapevine. My husband never went anywhere without the little black bag stuffed with the cash he'd give people when he sent them off to get things. With the growing distance between us, I was no longer certain what people were fetching for him, and that scared me. He asked me to meet him in LA one night, and as soon as I saw him in the hotel room, I could see there was something seriously wrong. He was still in bed, horribly sick to his stomach, and on the verge of weeping. He gripped my hand and asked me not to go away again. "Not without you," I said. "Do you think you can do this?" "No." He said he wanted to check out of the hotel and cancel the show. "Okay, we can do that. We can go home." He got dressed, and we went to the tour bus. I helped him get in bed and stroked his face and tried to talk to him, but he was beside himself. He told me there were pills in the hotel room. He didn't trust anyone else. He wanted me to go back up there and flush them down the toilet. Okay, I will." I kissed his cheeks and rocked him in my arms. "And then you're coming to Spain with me. We're stopping, we're resting. We're going to figure out how to be a family." He told me to take over. He said whatever I thought we should do, he would do that. I ran up to the room and found the pills exactly where he told me they'd be. I sat next to the toilet and cried for what felt like eons. Sorrow surged through me for our son, our pregnancy, the loss of connection to the love of my life. What would I do if I lost him? No answer came. I flushed the pills down the toilet, pulled myself together, and went downstairs. We stayed on the bus all night and went to the airport the next morning, but I flew back to Spain by myself. "I just have to do these last 2 shows of the tour," he said. "Then I'll meet you there." Several weeks later, I was still waiting. It comforted me a little to see his clothes in the closet and his piano in the living room. Eventually he did come for a few days, but then he left again. This became a dance we did. He'd say, "I'll be back Monday, just wait here for me." A few weeks later, he'd pass through again. Between visits, he'd call me almost every day and talk about what the study group was studying. I was more than irked by the Manuela thing, but I figured that would pass. I'd seen my parents survive affairs and infidelities. It didn't surprise or threaten me. This religion thing was another story, and had gotten it in his head that God was displeased with the life he had lived when he was younger, and Amir's death was part of the price he had to pay for that. He talked about David and Bathsheba and how David's sin had cost him the thing dearest to him, his son Absalom. This was a place I couldn't go to. I could not go there with him, no matter how hard he tried to make me see that path. "There was a time when you said our love was your salvation," I reminded him, thinking of the 7 versions of himself he kills off in 7, and together we'll live through all space and time. The man who once wrote to me, "You are my Jesus, your love is my salvation," now saw those words as blasphemous and ugly. But now if I express any disagreement with the teachings of the study crew, well, I'll quote their own literature. Watchtower, October 1998. Opposers try to hinder this work by mocking. Sometimes, individuals interested in the kingdom message give up because they cannot endure the ridicule. Jehovah's people long for the time when God will triumph over all his enemies. This will start with the destruction of Babylon the Great, a figurative city that embraces all forms of false religion. I had disobeyed my husband when it came to my healthcare decisions and refused to embrace the gospel according to Graham. I was the enemy now, the opposer who wanted to drag him back to the sinful ways of Babylon. I missed my husband with all my heart, but I had hope, because this was also the man who wrote this to me. I am married to my music. It never frowns at me. It's the one thing I know I can depend on. My music has proven itself time and time again. I shouldn't be asked to compromise. I write what comes to me. You've seen the process. You know it comes easy for me. Spirituality had always played a role in my husband's music, and this new path was no different. There are moments where it seeps into the lyrics, but creating music was, for him, a spiritual experience. Never had a spiritual path come in such conflict with the sexual nature of his music, and I felt certain the music would win out in the end. He would never compromise that, and no one was going to oppose it because that's where the money was. I believed that if I just waited out the Manuela thing, if I stayed steadfast and faithful to our marriage vows, we'd return to that place where we were at the end of the one, bound together on this plane of existence and all others. During his brief visits to Marbella, we'd sit up at night, and talk and talk and talk. But the long, soul-searching conversations we'd always enjoyed took a dark, baffling turn. I'd fall asleep trying to make sense of it and wake up to find he was gone again. In October 1998, as he began the New Power Soul Tour in Europe, my husband came to Marbella for a press conference at the Plaza de Toros. He looked weary, but well enough. He held my hand as we walked in, but we started out with a measurable gap between our chairs. It started with the usual questions and answers. I answered some in Spanish, which everyone in the room loved. Someone asked about a rumor that we'd purchased a house in Marbella, and he was evasive. My residence is the world. I'm happy anywhere. Someone else asked how he balances professional and personal lives, and he said, "For the past 20 years, I consider work my personal life. Being married has taught me a lot about taking better care of time and realizing that recreation means recreation of self. So I think I may take a vacation soon." I smiled when I heard that. I felt a surge of hope when he moved closer to me, took my hand, and wove his fingers through mine. There's a tragic aria in Madame Butterfly. The soprano sings, "Un bel dì," as she looks out over the sea, waiting for her lover. One beautiful day. I looked out at the sea from my house in Spain, with the same heart full of longing. And at some point in my waiting and longing and wondering, it occurred to me that I'd forgotten a lesson I learned my very first year at Paisley Park. The girl in Minneapolis is the girl on her way in. The girl who leaves Minneapolis is the girl on her way out. I guess I shouldn't have taken it so hard. Carmen Electra was replaced by a 16-year-old belly dancer. It took God Almighty to get me out of Minnesota.